Tabletop gaming is experiencing a full-blown renaissance. People everywhere are learning that tabletop games are a great way to reconnect with the analog world around them and rediscover their original social network. And so can you, thanks to GameBox Monthly. GameBox Monthly sends a unique new tabletop game right to your door every month. There are multiple subscriptions to choose from, and you can personalize each of them to fit your style. So whether you're looking to bring the family together for a weekly game night, a couple looking for the best stay-at-home date idea, or just someone looking for a great new way to spend a night with friends, GameBox sends a title just for you, letting you focus on what matters most, having great times with great people. So visit GameBoxMonthly.com now and use the promo code DRAGON to get an exclusive discount just for Dragon Wagon Radio listeners. Again, that's promo code DRAGON. Discounts. Everybody likes discounts. So what are you waiting for? Visit GameBoxMonthly.com right now and rediscover social. Yes, let's talk about it indeed. Thank you so much for tuning in for yet another episode of Elaborate. My name is Jake Lloyd. My guest this week is an incredibly funny comedian. You've probably shared one of his jokes on social media and don't even know it. His debut stand-up album called Be Nice is a top 10 iTunes seller right now. You should go and buy it. I am very excited to get to know a little bit better the one and only Nat Baimel. How's it going, Nat?
Pretty good, Jake. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for coming by. Nat, I assume that's short for Nathan.
Nathan?
Really? It's a Nathan.
It's short for Nathaniel.
Nathan is short for Nathaniel, which is short for...
Yeah, there was 1 year in high school where I had 4 periods, and as a joke, I went by Nat in one, Nate in another, Nathan in the third, and Nathaniel in the fourth.
That's lovely, just so that you could... By the way, if you're betting, always go for Nathaniel in the fourth. I met Nat, I met you a decade ago?
God, at least, yeah.
I want to say probably 2007 or 6, maybe.
Probably. I started comedy in 2007, so it had to have been around that time. Yeah.
I feel like I probably saw you within your first 5 months of stand-up.
I mean, probably. You were a Tampa guy, right?
Yeah, I hate it when people say that, but it's so unfortunate. I, lived in Tampa for a short period of my life and have been labeled a Tampa guy, which is like an insult. But I get it. I used to work at the Tampa Improv as a regular there. I also ran sound, and we just had all of the same stand-up friends.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing you do stand-up with a guitar.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
That was the early incarnation.
Yeah, well, I started that because I was actually in a band before I got into comedy, and
like everybody is.
And so it was like, well, I have a guitar and I like playing music. Maybe this will translate over. But then I was just about a year in, I realized I was just essentially a very poor Dimitri Martin knockoff, and realized I really need to figure out what I want to do.
It's weird. There's certain people that just get the pass for that, like the Nick Thunes and Dimitri Martin, where it's like, okay, when I see you at a club, I go, all right, put the guitar down and write jokes. But for some reason, a few get through where
if the jokes are solid enough, it's hard. It's with one-liners especially, just because they're so quick.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes to keep people's attention with one line. Even Stephen Wright is one of my all-time favorite comics.
One of the best.
But, he would do a special, and the special would be 40 minutes long, not even the usual hour.
Yeah.
And then it would be 30 years between specials.
Right.
It's I can now say I've done an album. I did an hour-long album. I didn't have to, I wrote a lot of jokes for it, but they're longer jokes, and I can not have to worry necessarily about I have to set up punch. I do that, but not to the extent of it's set up punch, completely different premise.
It's more of a narrative, storytelling style, or just a collective of opinions or observations versus just this that.
And unless those one-liners are just so sharp, every single last one of them, it's really easy to zone out.
Well, even the greatest one, even Mitch Hedberg, would have the bass player, you know what I mean?
Or is that first album of his? I forgot about that. Yeah, he sure did.
The bass player, and then I think from there the ball was handed to Zach Galifianakis on the piano, same kind of thing where. And every now and then it affects the comedy, but for the most part, it's just a one-liner joke with whatever is being played at the time.
It gives a rhythm to the jokes.
Absolutely, and yeah, I guess it allows for silence, like as far as in between your actual lines, you can kind of just let it sit there and it could play for a minute, and then the audience will relax, and then they'll hone in and wait for the next one. Yeah,
I would say more than anything, it is probably a rhythm thing. So I remember when I was first starting out, I had no stage presence whatsoever, and when I was not using the guitar, I was just very bad. I was meandering, I was robotic. But when I busted the guitar out, all of a sudden I did really well
because it forces you to stand there.
Exactly, but also gave me a rhythm to the jokes, and I knew when to do the setup, I knew when to pause, I knew when the punchline.
Because it was just you're just singing essentially without singing. Yeah,
exactly, and so there was that rhythm to it, and people knew when to laugh, and it just gave me a natural delivery. And I stopped using it. I remember when a friend of mine was saying, "Hey Nat, why don't you just use the guitar? That's the only part of your set that's any good."
Great advice, bud.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, it's like, oh, well, that's probably bad then. Right. That means it's a crutch, and I need to figure out how to get good without it. And then I eventually, started doing a lot more sets without the guitar, and to the point where I'm just like, oh, the guitar is a hindrance to me more than anything.
Wait, how long did that take you to discover?
I mean, the last time I ever used a guitar in my acts was probably like at least like 8 or 9 years ago. So about a year or two in.
Oh, so that's a long time to still be rocking it.
I mean, but it was also a thing where it was like the last 5 minutes.
Right.
And
yeah, I vaguely remember that. I think I remember like your closer or whatever.
Yeah, I would. The thing was, I would do offensive one-liner jokes.
Okay.
And I would play the guitar with them, and the music would also act as sort of a buffer where people wouldn't be as offended if there's nice music.
Yeah,
going
of course.
On
it's the juxtaposition of this sweet song and something horrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are a Central Florida native, right?
I'm actually a South Florida native, but I went to a school in Orlando, and that's where I started comedy.
Right, Orlando. Where in South Florida are you?
So we'll do the little drawing out on Google Maps thing. I'm from Cooper City, Florida.
Okay.
Which is near Pembroke Pines, Florida, which is near Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That's I usually just keep going to bigger and bigger cities until people have heard of one.
Something. Yeah, exactly. You said you went to school in Orlando. You mean in college or in high school?
College.
Oh,
gotcha.
Yeah.
So I went to elementary school in Miramar, Florida, which is nearest to Miami.
Okay.
And then middle school and high school, I went to Cooper City, which is, closer to Fort Lauderdale, and then college, Orlando.
I mean, despite the fact that I spent 4 years in Tampa, I have absolutely no grasp on the sort of demographic or style of what living in Florida is like. Do you know what I mean? Where you live, is it suburbia? Is it a little bit more dense? Is it more country? Is it
was definitely
swamplands? Was it you and alligators?
It was definitely suburbia, but so Cooper City it used to be a lot of forest. I remember when I was really young, I had relatives who lived out there, and it was mostly just trees, but then
nice.
Every time I go back to visit, it's just less and less green and more strip malls every single time. It's kind of sad, but at the same time also it's nice to have Cold Stone in town. Because when I was
I get it. I'm a total consumer.
When I was in high school, the cool kids, what they would do on the weekends is they would go to the only Wendy's in town,
right?
Which closed at 8, but they would just hang out in the parking lot, and that was the thing to do.
It was the local spot that everybody could meet up at. It was the central point. Yeah,
and it was the only thing in our town of note. So that's what people used to do.
And so. What about your lifestyle? Were you in the woods kid?
Oh no, I was an indoor cat.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I grew up on video games and all that nerdy nonsense.
Yeah.
I remember I had kids living on my street who at school would be like, "How come you never go outside?" I'd be
really? It was that bad? We had a reputation?
Yeah, because I'm just like, outside sucks.
Were you like that Nat kid? They would be like, "Oh yeah, this is that Nat kid."
Like with a couple of them.
Yeah.
It was a weird thing because I was like really nerdy, but there wasn't that much bullying at my school, and so I never felt like I was oppressed.
Were you a funny kid? Did you just feel like there was no bullying because you were probably one of the bullies, despite being an indoor kid?
No, I definitely wasn't a bully. I was. I don't think I was. No, I was not really a bully. I was, in terms of being funny, I'd say I was funny. Like my hero in life was Weird Al Yankovic. I would say I was more weird than funny.
Sure.
Like I would purposely try to just be as weird as possible.
Right.
And my best friend, I found out years later, he said he became friends with me because he thought it was hilarious how I would just say random nonsense and creep people out until they would leave.
You weren't looking for laughs, you were looking for reactions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's sort of what I did when I started comedy too. I realized is I didn't know how to make people laugh, but I knew how to make people react in some way.
Yeah.
And it was better than silence.
Which is not always a healthy habit, especially when you grew up and you have to have real relationships with other human beings.
Yeah.
When your sole goal is to get a reaction, that's not healthy when it's your go-to. I've definitely been there. So like, what kind of nerdy shit were you into as a kid? Oh wait, you're a wrestling fan. How come I forgot you just were on Wrestling Compadres a couple weeks ago, one of the shows I produce here on the network. You were a massive wrestling nerd. Was that like childhood wrestling nerd?
Yeah, so a joke is like it's like a family tradition because my grandfather was really into it. My dad was really into it.
Awesome.
And I'm into it. Matter of fact, my dad took my mom to watch WrestleMania on closed circuit, like a movie screen while she was pregnant with me. So I technically saw the first WrestleMania in utero. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yes, and like there's a bunch of baby videos of me at I think it was my second birthday party. I had one of those rubber Mean Gene toys while I was doing the "what's going on" motion, and I would hold it like a wand, and I would just like scream out at everybody with the thing. And my dad used to, when I was learning how to speak, would just teach me wrestler names. So there was a period of time where I would only communicate by going Jake the Snake.
Yeah, that's incredible. Who was like? Do you remember like your dad's favorites? I'm always interested as a wrestling nerd myself. I'm always interested to like what the previous generation was really into.
Yeah, my dad was a big WWF guy, and so he was really into Hulk Hogan and all the good guys. Like we still had a VHS tape labeled when Hulk lost the title to Andre.
Oh wow!
Through nefarious means, by the way.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
And that was like a thing that he shared with you?
Yeah. So he actually passed away when I was really young.
Oh no!
And so I got into it, and then I was out for a while, but then I got back into it in 4th grade. And I remember the match specifically was Shawn Michaels versus Diesel, no holds barred. And then I got super duper into it, and I was like considered kind of like
that was sort of at the beginning. That was during the new era, right? And
it's
slowly started becoming a little bit more edgy, a little bit more cool,
just a little bit. About a year and a half later is when the Attitude Era kicked in. Everyone started getting into wrestling, and all of a sudden I was the dude who had already been a fan for 2 years. And so I became kind of cool because they would say, "Oh, what's the deal with this person?" I'd be like, "Oh,
you know all the deets."
Yeah, exactly.
You were like the news crew for wrestling in your school.
Yeah, I was Wikipedia before that was a thing.
Yeah, there we go. Well, you said that your father's father was also into it. Was there ever a time where like the 3 generations all went or did wrestling together?
So I have both my grandfathers on both sides were into wrestling.
Okay.
Yeah. So on my dad's side, I'm actually named after that grandfather. He passed away before I was born.
Okay.
He was just Nathan, not Nathaniel, so I got an extra couple letters.
Sure.
Yay, new generation.
And that this is your father's father.
My dad's dad, yeah.
And he passed away before you were.
Yeah. Apparently, he took my grandmother to a wrestling show when she was pregnant with my dad. And I remember Gorgeous George was on it, way back in the day.
Yeah.
I remember my grandmother talking about it. She said, "Oh, he was so ugly. I was afraid that Larry was going to come out ugly if I saw him too much." I'm like, "God damn, that is some good smack talk, Grandma."
That is really good.
Yeah, and my grandfather on my mom's side, he was into wrestling, and he would take my uncle to see wrestling a lot in Miami. And he was more of an NWA guy.
Okay. It's interesting that the two of them were like, "Oh, well, this is the good promotion. No, this is the good promotion."
Yeah. And so on my mom's side, like when my dad passed away, I became really close to my grandfather, my living one on my mom's side.
Okay.
And he became like very much a father figure to me. We spent a lot of time together. And it's funny because he had a very thick Polish accent, and every so often when he found out I was into wrestling, he would try to watch every so often and have talks with me.
Right.
And he would remember certain things. Whenever Ric Flair would come on the screen, he would remember him from, back in the 70s and 80s. And I remember because he couldn't never remember his name. He would just say, "Oh, I was watching wrestling the other day, and the blonde one came on. Oh, he must be old."
Yeah, this was then.
Yeah. The 90s, yeah.
Yeah, when, if you don't mind, when exactly did your father pass away?
He died in 1988 when I was about 3.5 years old.
Oh, gotcha. What did he pass away from?
Stomach cancer.
Jeez, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you remember him?
I remember flashes of him. So
yeah, because I don't think that I remember anything from before I was 4 years old, 4 or 5.
Yeah, like I remember walking into the bathroom once when he was shaving and just being sort of enraptured by watching him shave for whatever reason. I remember him picking me up a couple times. I remember going to the store to get bagels with him, and just a couple of like flashes. And so growing up, it was the way I sort of describe it. I had more of an idea of a dad than an actual dad.
Yeah, at 3 or 3.5, do you kind of remember grasping with that, or is that something that you just like?
So I think it was because obviously it was cancer, so it wasn't something quick.
Yeah.
So I think they tried to hide it from me for a while because I
Okay.
don't think he wanted to have me remember him like that.
Right, right.
And so a lot of it is I remember from stories, but I do vividly remember coming home. I guess I don't know if it was the day of or the day after or something, but I remember my mom sort of sitting me down and explaining, Dad's not here anymore, and
And you can remember that conversation?
yeah, yeah. I remember just not really believing it for whatever reason. I
Okay.
remember I sort of like ran to the bedroom. I didn't see him in there, and that's sort of when it dawned on me.
Oh, you almost have a recollection of it being sort of like a game
Yeah, I
or
thought it
like
was
she was
like a hide and seek thing. She was like,
right,
saying he's not here, and me asking, "Oh, well, when will he be back?" And
right.
she's saying he's not coming back, and
Wow.
it's a pretty heavy thing, 3 years
No,
old.
yeah, I can't imagine.
And it's funny because like later on in life, I realized I had issues that popped up, mainly being that like my dad was amazing and everybody loved him.
Okay.
It was one of those things where everyone's like, it's like, oh, no one had a bad word to say about him, and usually you would say that after someone dies, but like with him, it was real.
It's tenfold, yeah.
Yeah, like our next door neighbors, they were a married couple with a bunch of kids, and they all loved him. And the husband, he was best friends with my dad, and apparently, like, he's never been the same since.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and everyone just like adored him. Never had a bad word to say. He was apparently super nice and funny. I apparently got my sense of humor from him, and so like I grew up religious as a result, which is funny. Is the religion was never really forced on me or anything. We were like really laid back Jewish. But I like in my head, I always, people would be like, "Oh, your dad's such a good person. You'll see him in heaven. You'll see him in heaven." So I sort of like had this idea in my head.
You
It's like,
latched onto that.
yeah, okay, I have to be a really good person so I can go to heaven. So like, I would just have these like crazy guilt complexes wherever I did anything even slightly wrong. I would think it's like, "Oh no, I'm gonna go to hell." And
Wow. Did did your family go to temple? Like, did your mother take
yeah,
you
yeah,
to
no, I
temple?
was bar mitzvah, but it was never like we were very reformed. Like
Okay.
maybe leaning towards conservative, but like I
Right.
said, like after I was bar mitzvah, we almost stopped going to temple entirely.
Right. Did like because I'm trying to think. You say like you almost became a religious kid because you lost your father. Like, in what ways? Like, were did you think you were being actively religious if you weren't in temple? Like
Yeah,
like
it
a
was
4 or 5-year-old isn't like getting the Torah and like
yeah, like I do this whole story on storytelling shows about how I didn't lose my virginity till I was almost 26.
Okay.
And a big reason was in my head, I'm just like, okay, I just need to like, not like chase ladies. I need to just do everything I can to be pure. And it was a thing where like we didn't go to temple all that much, but for me, it was just being a good person as best I can, and just
Right.
essentially like I had this idea of God, but it was also more like I didn't realize now after the fact, it was more me thinking of like, oh, this is like me trying to live up to the idea of my dad.
Right.
And getting to talk to my mom afterwards when I sort of like realized this, and she was like, "Oh, like he wasn't perfect. He
Of course.
would gamble here and there. He had like his
You
things."
start hearing about some
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
problems or some of the things that you didn't necessarily know.
And it wasn't even like any bad things, but it was nice to hear. It's like, oh, he was human. He wasn't just like this
Right.
angel that I'd never be able to live up to.
Sure. And did your father have any siblings? Do you have any uncles?
Oh, yeah,
or
he
aunts?
has a sister.
Oh, gotcha. Are you close with her?
No, because her husband is a terrible human being, and he has
Fair
messed up a lot of their kids.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to kind of get a picture. You said that your grandfather on your mother's side, who was still around, stepped in and sort of became a paternal figure to you.
Mhm.
Did he live nearby? Was he around?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So all of them lived in South Florida. So it was a funny thing, like growing up, I would see my grandmother on my dad's side on Saturdays, and I would see my grandmother and grandfather on my mom's side on Sundays.
Okay.
And they lived not terribly far from each other at all. So I would just had a close relationship with all my grandparents
Oh, that's
growing up.
great.
But especially my grandfather.
Right.
Like, he and I just like had this very special bond.
Well, that's great. So let me ask you this question. People who are listening, who have been listening to many of these shows, know that we're not even 20 minutes in, and you've already struck the magic chord. My father took off when my mother was born with me.
Oh, wow.
And it is incredible how many people I've had on this show that are in the entertainment industry in some capacity who have, and obviously I'm not going to refer to him as absentee, but didn't have the father present, whether it was they were lost very young or they just weren't there or for whatever reasons. And I always talk about personally in my experience, like even as a kid, I knew that I was like pitied. Like if you would have asked me, I would have said I'm fine. Like, I didn't have dad around, but I was raised by a litany of women, a ton of and I had influences. But you absorb as a kid everything everybody says. You can hear things. People don't realize that. And people always would pity me because like, oh, you know, your dad's not, you don't have a dad and this and that. Did you feel any of that? Did you have that similar experience?
So I didn't, because I do very much remember when I was going into preschool, I remember my mom, like, I think she might have even done this in front of me, but she sat down, you know, the people sort of like in charge of the preschool and were like, hey, his dad died. I don't want him getting any special treatment for that. I don't want him getting any pity or anything. I want you to treat him like you treat everybody else.
Wow.
Yeah, no,
that is incredibly commendable.
My mom's a badass like that.
My mom would have been like, give him everything.
Yeah.
Give him anything and everything. His dad's an asshole and his dad is gone. We would have had completely different experiences.
And it's funny because like a lot of times people in comedy just in general is like, man, Nat, you're always so optimistic. You're always so upbeat. You're always so nice. Why is it? And I think a big part of it is because losing my dad so young did put a lot of things into perspective.
Yeah.
Because when, you know, shit goes bad, I can be like, oh, okay, this sucks, but it's not like, you know, having mortality explained to me before I was fully able to like be potty trained entirely.
Right.
And like, I don't know, it's just a strange sensation.
So would you say that because, sorry to interrupt, but would you say like that because you sort of faced a hardship very young, it made potential later hardships just generally easier? Is that what you're trying to get at?
I'd say so.
Yeah.
Like I would say that it's easier to be upbeat and look on the bright side of things when you've already been through something that rough. And it's not to say that I don't like get sad or depressed from time to time, but at the same time, it is easier to like keep me grounded for certain things.
Wow. That is that's really interesting because I couldn't be more on the opposite side of that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
obviously different situation. My father's still out there somewhere.
And that's the thing. Like I've said this like as a joke before, but I almost feel lucky in a certain way compared to a lot of people I know. And that, I mean, the jokey joke thing I say is, you know, I like, what is it? It's like, oh, I'm haunted by my dad's ghost, but some people are haunted by their dad's words, and that seems way harder to get over.
Wow. Yeah, that's very poignant.
Yeah.
So you weren't the pitied kid without a dad. Had a family structure.
Yeah.
You had mom who seemed like she was a badass. What did mom do?
She was she worked at like data entry at the Miami Police Department for about 30 some odd years.
Government job.
Yeah, man.
It's another theme. Just had Chris Fairbanks on last week. Parents, 2 government jobs.
Really?
What is it with government employed parents? I feel like it's such a common thing. Apparently, if you want your son or daughter to be a humorous person, just work for the government.
Yeah, just anything you can do to just the more boring job you can have,
right? Is that what it is?
Like most absentee father you can have. Oh, it's a recipe for success.
That's why I want my kid to be successful. I'm bailing immediately, just like my dad did. No, that's terrible.
If you ever have a son, they're like, I want to be an artist. You're like, see ya.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna do you a favor. Door closed, car start, driveway. Was your mom?
Yeah, so I like my mom always says my sense of humor is very similar to my dad's, but my mom is very funny.
Yeah,
she's funny in her own way. Like she's very quick, and it's one of those things where just like talking with her, I don't realize how she is, but in just different comedic settings, she just always shines.
She's on it.
Like I remember an early set of mine at the old Why Not Lounge in Altamont Springs, Florida.
Oh wow,
bonkers! Yeah,
bonkers! Yeah,
I used to do some awful joke about my penis being like 12 inches long, you know, just like one of those like I'm 22 years old and just doing what I think is like funny Florida wiener humor.
Yeah. Oh, Florida loves wiener humor.
They sure do. That's actually
if you can figure out a way to tie NASCAR into that wiener humor, you are golden.
It's actually on the welcome sign. It's like welcome to the wiener states.
Yes, perfect.
So I remember I did some wiener joke, and I remember my friend Ken Miller, shout out, who was headlining the show, he came on after me. He goes, hold up, everybody. This is Nat's mom right here in the front row. He did that joke in front of her. He goes, yo, mama, is his penis really that big? And he puts the mic in her face, and like with almost no hesitation, she goes, well, let's just say when I had to change him as a baby, I had to do it like this. And she just held her arms all the way out.
Wow.
And it got, to this day, maybe one of the biggest applause breaks I've ever seen. Yeah.
Literally, that one line got better laughs than anything you've ever done.
Yeah, and that was probably like the best that I had ever had up to that point. And she just like immediately crushed it. And I was like, man, I am so proud, but also so jealous right now. It's a strange sensation.
That's incredible. So just to go back really quickly to sort of your adolescence, you're a nerdy kid, you're into wrestling, you watch wrestling with grandpa. Like what are you like? I'm gonna be funny. I'm a funny guy. Like when you were really young, were you one of those people who knew early on like what you wanted to do, or were you just like
So I was always pretty funny, apparently. Like when I was a little kid, I was a little bit of a center of attention. But when I get a little bit older, I became really shy.
Right.
But I still, with my friends, I would always crack jokes and whatnot. But I was always had kind of an artistic streak. I would draw here and there.
Right.
I've never wanted to be anything normal in my life. When I was really young, I wanted to be a wrestler when I grew up. Yeah,
that's what you got to do.
Yeah, no, I remember at one point my mom put a coffee table in our living room. I got really upset because that was my practice space.
Oh,
and I was like,
God, what are you doing?
I know, you're ruining.
I can't do my rolls.
Yeah, unless you want me to like put one of the stuffed animals through that thing, you gotta move it. And so, once I realized like, oh, I'm really strong, I don't think I'm gonna be a wrestler, I got into music and then I wanted to be in a band. But even the band I was in, essentially, it was like Green Day meets Weird Al. It was just punk rock with funny lyrics.
Yeah.
And I would just write all the funny lyrics myself.
And this is probably
60
like
songs.
late 90s, early 2000s, probably.
Yeah. And then, in college...
it's a shame we didn't have more things in common.
And then the band fell apart, and I remember my school was having an amateur comedy competition, and I had written a couple jokes after seeing just a terrible comedy show.
Right.
And I remember thinking I could do that. Nice. And then when the competition happened, I entered it. And I had a really good set. I took second place. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. I don't have to rely on anybody but me. I love this. And then I bombed for years afterwards.
Yeah, sure.
And I kept at it, I think, just because I had that first good set. So I had that taste. And I just kept chasing that high again.
Right. That's literally exactly how I got into stand-up.
Oh, really?
From being I was a singer in a band who in between songs just started being funny.
Oh, wow.
And then eventually I was like, I kind of like this part a little bit more than the other part.
Yeah.
And also, if I don't have to rely, like you said, I don't have to rely on anybody.
Yeah, so
I could just do this part by myself.
So my band, we never even did a single show. We barely ever, so it was
So you were a, quote, band.
It was one of those things. Like, my two best friends in high school, we formed the band together, but we practiced maybe once every 3 months because...
real a lot of drive there.
Yeah, exactly. And it was frustrating to me because I would do so much work for it. I would write the songs, I would write the guitar parts, the drum part, or not the drum part, but the bass parts. I would just do all this work, and to the point where from I think sophomore year of high school to sophomore year of college, I had probably written over 60 songs and 4 albums worth of stuff. It wasn't any good, but
it was there.
I was just very driven.
It was a catalog.
Yeah. And I was just very prolific, and I was just writing all this stuff. But whenever I wanted to practice, it was, oh, I got a job, or I got a test to study for, or I'm grounded. And then when I went from South Florida to Orlando, I was essentially the only original member, so I found new people to start a band with.
Nice.
And we were practicing, but same thing. It's like, oh, I got a final to study for, and that's when I got into comedy and realized, oh, it's just me, and I can actually do shows now.
Yeah, I don't have to wait. I have to worry about scheduling for these other...
With, 2-3 other people.
What did you think that you were going to do once you were in, like, high school age?
Honestly, band.
That was it? So you wanted to be a musician?
Yeah, I just really loved it. And it was one of those things where...
Did you go to school for music?
No, it's one of those I just picked up. Like, my friend... I started playing guitar in the most random way possible. Due to my bus stop, used to always carry a guitar with him. And I remember he saw me with a Green Day album or something, and he said, can I borrow that? And I said, okay, can I borrow your guitar? And I tried teaching myself, but I didn't know you had to hold the frets down to make the notes change.
Sure.
And so later on, he's like, oh, did you learn any songs? And I said, yeah, I learned how to play, what was it? I think Unforgiven or something.
Yeah, the one Metallica song. Yep, everybody knows. Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't even the one that actually is the open strings. It's one that doesn't have open strings. And so I start playing it, and I thought I played it by ear, and he's like,
that's not the song.
You have to hold the frets. And I said, what are frets? And then he said, he'll teach me. And then he's a really cool dude, but it was this weird style. He thought I needed negative reinforcement to...
Oh, he saw like, a drill sergeant in the movie once.
Exactly.
I was like, this is how I teach stuff.
Yeah, so
and that man grew up to be the teacher in Whiplash. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, J.K. Simmons and I are the same age. You can't tell because I look real good for 50, whatever.
Me too.
So yeah, he would sort of teach me how to play. I couldn't do it very well. He would say, Nat, you're never going to get good at this. And I would say, dude, I know you're trying to have me prove you wrong, but you could just
be nice.
Be nice.
Be
yeah.
Nice.
Plug.
Plug. We'll get there. How old are you when this is happening?
15.
Okay, so you're still like early high school.
Yeah. And so, I learned how to play from him, and then I would just did tabs online and everything. The only ever training I had is I had a guitar class my senior year.
Oh,
but it
in
was
school?
very
Yeah, that classical class, which is,
Yeah.
it's just you walk in there and you just want to scrape your ears out of your, it's just the worst.
I loved it just because it was very entry level, and I already been playing a few years at that
So
point.
you're the hot shot? Yeah.
Yeah, and so it would be like you had all week to learn how to play a C chord.
Right.
And then after the first day, I would play a C chord for him. He says, "Okay, just don't disturb anybody." And so I just get to do whatever I wanted in class for the week.
Nice. Yeah, I remember I had heat in, to use a wrestling term, heat in high school, because I didn't take any of the guitar classes in school, but I also was just a self-taught, taught myself guitar outside of school. And since I excelled in music, I played like little brass and or the horns, stuff like that. When the band teacher found out that I played guitar, he let me play guitar in jazz band.
Oh, wow.
Because I could read basic, music, and I could read, chord progressions and whatnot. And I remember everybody who was in the actual guitar classes in school was like, "What the hell? This guy gets to play in the jazz band." And I have like no like school quote training.
Yeah.
And I had some legit heat. They hated me, man. The people that like the guitar kids in my school did not like me. I was a total outsider. Like nobody liked my band because I was a part of it. Like I had legit heat. Fucking heal for life, man. # heal for life.
That was the name of the band.
Should have been. But you didn't go to school for music though.
No, so when I got into college, I don't know why it didn't occur to me to go for music. I guess maybe I probably had an audition or something, and I didn't know how to read music at the time. I didn't think I would do it. So I started majoring in creative writing and got minors in film and mass communication, TV stuff. So once I sort of switched over my dream of wanting to just be a comedian, I realized, oh, this is good that I did this because now I know how to write a story and scripts and whatnot.
I mean, it definitely doesn't hurt. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
Like understanding the basic creative process to start with. Like you can form a story, then you could probably form a joke,
Yeah, and it also just very much taught me, you write something, you see how people react to it, and then you rewrite it.
That's a very valuable lesson that a lot of people do not have.
Yeah.
Most people cannot take notes, so they can't change. Like most people take their art not too seriously, but like they cherish it a little bit too much.
Yeah, and then, college was when I learned that ever so important artistic expression, kill your darlings.
Kill your darlings, yeah.
Yep, and I realized, it applies to comedy too. If a joke's not working, it doesn't matter how much you like it. If you need to figure out why it's not working.
Right, yeah. So do you graduate college?
I did, actually.
Oh, wow. I said that with the tone of my voice that just assumed you didn't.
I mean,
because I figured we've been so similar up until this point. I figured like, well, he also didn't finish college.
Yeah, no, I did. So I went, I started comedy, I would say probably, let's see, if it was 2007, it would have been my junior year when I started really hitting it. And so I was sort of the college kid comedian in the scene for a while.
Yeah.
And then I graduated.
Yeah, I mean, I say this as if I'm so much older than you, but I do remember in that little group of those Tampa comics, I remember you were like the young one. You were like, I was like, oh yeah, that's like the kid with the guitar, blah, blah, blah. Because, when you're like, I was probably, I don't know, trying to do the math now. I was probably 25.
Yeah.
When you're 25, you think like, I'm an adult now. So anybody who's 22 is a child, 21.
Yeah. But it's funny. I never even really realized how young I was compared to a lot of the other people. But at the same time, were a couple years older than me.
I was young compared to some of the people that we were in that group with. I was still 2 or 3 years younger than a couple of people, and I'm about 2 or 3 years older than you.
But then I just kept going to school because I'm also really lucky in that I did really well in school, and so I had a full scholarship, and so it wasn't like
you were. I didn't even, we glazed right past that, but you were a good student.
Yeah, I graduated with a 4 point.
Oh, screw you.
Something GPA in high school because I had a bunch of AP and honors classes. So
really,
I think out of a class of a couple hundred kids, I was like the number 25 ranked.
Do you think
or something?
To bring it back, do you think that you had a like work ethic in school the same way that you talked about how like religion, like trying to live up to your father? Do you think that was part of that, or do you think you were just
I think it was one of those things where I didn't want to disappoint my mom and disappoint people. But also, it wasn't even so much that, because I now have a love for learning more than I did back then. Because back then it was just me playing the system. I just knew how to get A's and stuff. I just knew how to study effectively for tests, memorize the thing the night before.
Sure.
just spew out the answers that they wanted, and then just completely forget everything right afterwards.
Yeah, did you do your homework and shit like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was the same way except for the homework. Like I barely graduated high school because I had an A's in all of my tests, but I had zeros in homework. I had 4 years of high school, I never did a single homework assignment.
It's funny because I still do this to this day. Whenever I have something that I have to do, I always do it as quickly as possible, just so I don't have to do it anymore.
I hate
I hate having that feeling of knowing I'm going to have to do something.
Oh man,
like
yeah, so do I. But then I still can't bring myself to do it.
That's the thing. Whenever I have a writing assignment or anything, I'll just crank it out as fast as possible. Because my favorite thing in the world is not having any responsibility. I love not having to do anything.
But the interesting part is like by doing that, you've given yourself such this ridiculous work ethic, and you have so much responsibility.
I mean, I'm very irresponsible because I hate being responsible.
Was your mom the kind of person who was like, do your homework first and then you get to play video games or something like that?
I don't know. I mean, she probably must have told me that at some point in my life. I just don't remember it, but I just always remember doing it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, she would always want me to get A's and everything. If I ever got a B, she wouldn't like be mad or anything. She'd just be disappointed. It's just that ancient Jewish guilt.
Way
secret.
worse.
Yeah.
Oh man, that Jewish guilt runs deep.
Yeah, and so it's just like, oh god,
yeah,
I don't want to feel this way. I hate this feeling.
Yeah,
I used to be a bit of a shit kid when I was probably 5 to 7.
Okay,
I was just very loud and obnoxious and self-centered. And I remember one day I completely changed almost overnight because my mom guilted me so effectively in one sitting.
Wow.
And I remember I had gotten in trouble at school for something. She was, I didn't realize, like single mom, everything she's gone through.
Sure.
And I remember she was just very upset at something. I just remember like yelling about how I wanted a dessert of some sort. And she just broke down crying. And I just remember feeling so bad about it.
Wow. She laid that good on you.
Yeah, and I remember apologizing. And then I remember the next day at school, I just said, I'm going to be good from now on.
Right.
And then,
that was it.
Yeah, it was literally my real life face turn.
That's great.
Yeah, and then I remember the teacher on, like the quarterly report card,
Right.
She said, I've never seen a kid change so drastically in such a short amount of time.
Well, because she cried at you.
She cried at me one time, yes.
Wow. There is something to that because I'll never forget, this was way later. I was already a teenager, but I do remember she said something and I fucking said something back to her real sassy. Just woke up real sassy that day. And she went to hit me and I like caught her hand or like I stopped her, and I remember like I put my elbow backwards and just kind of like stopped her hand from hitting me and I just like held it there. And I think when she realized like, oh, I can't hit him anymore, I remember she started crying and I was like, no, it's okay, Mom. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. And like watching her cry, even though it was much, much later in life, watching her cry, that shit definitely made me a much better kid for at least a couple weeks, for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Watching your mom cry because of some shit, that's very effective, especially if you're a mama's boy and your dad's not around anyway. And you're like, this is the caretaker. But we glossed past this too. I didn't ask, are you an only child?
I am an only child.
I assume so because you haven't mentioned a sibling since.
Yeah, apparently my parents wanted to have another kid, but my dad got sick, and apparently I was also. My mom says that was a miracle I was even born. So I guess both my parents had medical issues, and doctors told each of them individually they'd probably never be able to have kids.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know what exactly they were, but it was one of those things they had like surgeries and all sorts of crazy nonsense. And
you're officially a miracle.
Yeah. It's another thing. It's a lot to live up to, here it's like I have to live with this idea of my dad also. Like, I shouldn't have even been born. So this miracle child to them. In Hebrew, my name means gift from God.
Jeez Louise.
I know. So.
They really just laid you groundwork for success.
Yeah, so I'm always just looking up at that bar I'll never be able to grasp.
Seriously, the brass ring.
Yeah.
Mom is still around, I'm assuming. Thrilled that you're in comedy, that you're doing well.
Yeah, she is insanely supportive of me.
Was she supportive of you when you were sort of doing your like, I'm going to be a musician? Was she always?
Yeah, I think it's because, my grandmother, her mom, my uncle, her brother, was very artistic. He loved drawing. He loved doing all these things, but she was very sort of old Jewish, old country Polish, and she just wanted him to grow up to be a doctor, and she would very much discourage anything he did artistically.
Oh, really?
And I guess my mom sort of saw how bitter that made him and didn't want to do that to me, so she would always encourage me being artistic in anything I did.
Yeah.
When I would like write little stories in elementary school or draw anything, she'd always tell me how great it was and tell me, oh, keep going. And so when I told her, I want to be a comedian, she said, okay, it's going to be a tough life. Make sure you can, support yourself in other ways. But if this is what you love to do, you should do it.
Right. Wow.
And again, that's also very lucky considering a lot of comedian friends I know and their parents take on their career path.
Yeah. But you know what, though? I do feel like there is sort of, for as many people that are like, oh, I succeeded in the face of my parents. Like, actually last week, Chris mentioned, like BJ Novak, who was like, "Oh yeah, screw you guys! I have he was a doctor or law degree or whatever he went to, some Harvard shit or something like that. He's like, I'm going to be a comedian," and they're like, damn it. For as many as those as there are, I think there are plenty of people who were just nurtured into their craft.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of probably realtors right now telling their parents, "Yeah, you were right.
Yeah, you were sure.
Wish I had done this sooner."
Yeah. People, it's true. People who are like, you know what? I got a realtor's license, or I'm a tattoo artist now, or depending on like which style of comedy they were telling. That it depends on what their job is now.
Yeah.
I guys, listen. I bought a lot of Bitcoin. Was your mother? So outside of being supportive, was she helpful? Because I feel like that's another step that I'm interested in always hearing. Like, did she help figure out how for you to accomplish things that you want to accomplish, or was she just sort of like, if you want to do it, good for you, I support you? But
it was more the latter.
Yeah,
because comedy is such a crazy profession that people doing comedy a long time don't know how to get ahead.
Right.
She'd try to help in weird ways. She'd say, it's like, oh, I saw this flyer for this comedy show. Maybe you should hit them up and see if you can perform here.
That right there is more helpful than I think a lot of people. Like, my whole thing was my mother didn't know how to aid me in assisting in anything. Much like you. I wanted to be a pro wrestler. I wanted to work in the wrestling industry, and then I wanted to be a referee. And then I was playing in bands, and I was like, I'm going to record music. And all these different things that I was going on. She was very supportive in each of them, but it was sort of like, I don't know, how do you do that? Go do whatever. Like, there's no, her big, even to this day, I turned 35 in a couple days, and literally to this day, her biggest suggestion is you should write Oprah. Or now you should write Ellen. They tell Ellen that you're out there. You never know. Maybe Ellen helps you. You made a movie. Maybe Ellen will tell people about your movie. Like, all right, thanks, Mom. I didn't realize that it was that simple. But so even if your mother is like, hey, look, I saw a sign for a comedy show. That's not nothing.
Yeah. And she was also really good, because I know a lot of comedians, they'll have their relatives do that thing. It's like, hey, why don't you just write for SNL?
Yeah.
She would never do anything that unrealistic. It would be, I saw this very local South Florida comedy club. Maybe you could do a spot here.
Yeah.
Although maybe I should be upset about that. Maybe I should be like, why don't you think I could have just written Jay Leno?
Yeah. Huh? Hey, mom, how about you aim higher for me? How about that?
Yeah, why didn't you think I could write for Jay Leno? Because you're not a hack, honey.
Hey.
Weird Jay Leno burn in the middle of all this.
It's allowed. I'm not sure if you've ever worked at the Comedy Magic Club with the guy, but trust me, it's allowed. So, let me ask this. I'm going to, just to kind of bring this back, as far as you saying, oh, I've always felt the need to live up to my father. How you're in your 30? How old are you?
32.
32. You've got a stand-up album out that you just released that's doing fantastic. You crush it on the internet. I mentioned it in the opening. People don't realize this, but Nat, like, you are such a poignant writer, and your comedy translates to a written word in such a way that literally people just share photos of you with your jokes written next to them.
Yeah.
Constantly. You're one of like the most shared comedians online, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, I've never looked at stats or anything,
right,
but I have been shared a lot. And I will say one of my proudest accomplishments in comedy, not even from a career standpoint, from a life standpoint. So I have a girlfriend. I've been, living with her for a few years. We're madly in love. We know we're not married. It's one of those situations.
Right. You don't have to brag.
But here's the thing. So it's one of those situations where her parents, very great people, but I didn't understand they're a little worried. It's like, oh, he's a comedian.
Yeah, what does that mean?
You know, are you going to have to support him? What's this mean? And I remember one of my jokes. It's a big joke I do. It's actually on the album about being Jewish and us not having any mascots for our holidays.
Okay.
I posted online. It got shared around a lot. I guess someone translated it into, I guess, Dutch or some language.
Wow.
And my girlfriend's mom's, a friend of hers, who I guess was in Amsterdam or some European country, was at temple, and the rabbi read the joke.
Oh my goodness.
It said this is a joke from an American comedian named Nat Baimel. And I remember her friend said, "Oh my god," and called her up and said, "Isn't right. Katie's boyfriend?" And she was just so elated.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, it's on the side of the that's incredible.
That it legitimized me as like a comedian, as a career path in her eyes. So it was just, oh yes, awesome.
All right, so that covers the potential in-laws. What about your father? What about, like, how do you feel? You feel like you've lived up to it? Do you still feel like you're fighting every day for it?
I'd say I fight the battle more with myself now than
of
with
course.
him.
It's always personal. Yeah.
But no, I've talked to my mom about it, and she says, he'd be like wildly proud of me.
Wow.
And he would just thought it was the coolest thing ever that his son is a comedian of all things. Because he was that mindset of like, he was a court reporter, but at the same time, he loved being just weird and everything. Yeah. He always wore Toys R Us shirts and whatnot, and would play crazy pranks on people all the time. And so she said it would I'd been insanely proud. So I'm like, I think I'm doing pretty well.
Nice. Are you still a religious person? You still consider yourself a religious person?
Not really. My whole philosophy on religion is just, we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just try to be a good person as much as you can, and
be nice.
Tie it all together. Yeah.
Be nice.
And that's actually the album title came from my closing joke, which is about religion, and it's essentially, no matter what you believe, that's the one message we can all sort of bandy behind.
Yeah. Let's talk about the album itself. Where did you record this thing?
I recorded it at Comedy on State in Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay, and was there a reason for deciding on Madison?
Yeah, so I had done the club about 5 years prior, and it was one of the best clubs I had ever performed at.
Okay.
And I just love the Midwest as a place to perform, because it's just a wonderful sort of melting pot of people they have liberal sensibilities, but conservative work ethic, and they're not stereotypically offended by everything PC wise, but at the same time they're also open-minded,
and they really appreciate sincerity. I've noticed that a lot about the Midwest. Like, that's, if you're sincere, their bullshit meters are fantastic.
And so I like performing in the Midwest. I've been on the road for so many years, and I just feel comfortable in club settings, because I love LA. I love doing sets out here, but because there's so many comedians, it's rare to get a long set out here.
10 minutes tops.
Yeah, and so it's like, you're out here, you're doing a bunch of jokes, but on the road you get to do your act. You get to really open up and stretch your legs out. And I was able to do that there, and like I said, it's one of the best run clubs in the country. I can't. If you guys are in Madison, go to the club. It's unbelievably awesome. And I get to record there, and I consider myself very lucky as a result, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out.
Yeah. When did you record it?
I recorded it in November of 2017.
I gotcha. So pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah.
3 or 4 months, 5 months, something like that.
Yeah, and the label I went through, Comedy Dynamics, they were so unbelievably awesome. They literally just sent me all the audio recordings and said, edit it any way you want. Like, they gave me complete creative control. They said, whatever you want for a cover, whatever you want for this, title, tracks, just let us know. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Because I know some people who have done albums, and the label will just do everything, whether they want it or not. And then they'll see the final product, and the cover is all cheesy, and they just don't like the audio clips they use, and doesn't sound good mixed together. And they're just like, why did I do this?
So you don't come off to me as a person who is generally like self-depreciative. You seem like a pretty confident dude.
Yeah.
How does it feel to have an album out? You mentioned earlier in passing that, like, as a child, one of your heroes was Weird Al Yankovic.
Yeah.
How does it feel to have an album out that is literally above a Weird Al Yankovic album, side by side on a chart?
I mean, I'm realistic. Like, I'm confident in my abilities, and it took me a long time to get there too.
Sure.
Because bombing for years on the stage, you're always doubting yourself.
Yeah.
And
why would I put myself through this more?
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm also realistic. Like, I sold a lot of albums, I assume, the first day. There's a lot of pre-orders and everything, and I assume Al will be on the charts long after my thing falls off.
Yeah. Well.
But for that one shining moment in time.
Yeah.
It was very, very nice. Because Weird Al is the reason I got into music in general, not to mention comedy as well. And so to see myself buy past 2 of his albums on the way up the charts, it was just really cool to see.
Yeah.
He probably wouldn't even notice as he at a point where he doesn't care. But
because he's been up there for how long? He's going to be up there for how much longer?
But I screen capped it, so that's going to be forever for me.
That's how I know it happened. I saw the social media.
Oh, yeah. No, I was very, very... it's weird because I hate promoting myself. It's the truth is I'm very confident in my abilities. I'm also very egotistical, I think, in a lot of ways, because I think you have to be if you're a comedian. But at the same time, I also do hate promoting myself. So I hate seeming cocky.
Yeah,
and so it's that weird mixture.
Here's the thing: is that your confidence and your cockiness is an extension of a personality that you have.
Yeah,
but it's sincere. When you're on stage and you're doing it's a sincere version of you. And there's something about just self promotion and just promotion in general that just seems so insincere. It's like, I'm telling you this now because I know that I have to tell you this so that the thing that I'm doing is wildly known or whatever, instead of just hey, I have a thing I want to tell you guys about. It just seems so forced. Yeah, I struggle with that. I can't. I rack my heads around just social media in general. I mean, people that are listeners of the show, I thank you guys so much for listening. I don't know how to make people like the social media accounts for the show, and I don't. I don't try hard enough, and because I feel like if I do anything, it just seems insincere.
Yeah, even promoting the album, I felt weird because something I'm actually very proud of.
Yeah,
I liked it.
You should be. It's a decade in the making. And,
and the feedback I've gotten has been overwhelmingly positive, and I've been very touched by some people's comments on it. But at the same time, I've been on numerous podcasts and different places promoting it. And people are oh, tell me about it. I'm like, I really like it. It's good.
It's good. You should. You probably like it.
Really hype it up. I don't know how people are just this is changing the game.
Yeah.
This is I can't.
You don't have that rapper's confidance.
Yeah, I don't think I would ever have that level of confidence. But genuinely, I like the album. I think it's very good, and I would listen to it if I didn't do it, I guess. Like I said, I just feel weird pumping the thing.
Sure. Are you touring now that the album is out? Are you trying to?
Yeah. So right now, I'm got a couple of fun road dates coming up, and I'll still be doing some of the material off the album, but I'm also really working hard on putting up some new material too.
Right.
And it's
you just sold all of
yeah, no. It's a strange process too, because I've been doing some of those jokes for a very long time, and you can hear in the albums those are real polished, and it's a weird feeling of just go up on stage and
pulling a notepad and going, what else?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with where some of the new material's going, and it's I can feel it's definitely a growth from the old material. It's oh sweet, it's exploring new themes touched upon in that, and
also what's nice is that now that you have a finished product, you have learned how to get to that spot. So you will be so much more efficient in getting there again.
I'll be honest, it feels so much easier writing new material now than it did beforehand. Because it's okay, I know the process of this. I know how this can tie into this, and everything links together.
Because you've done a decade's worth of work on it. Yeah. Like my feature film that I just finished, I watch it and I'm I'm proud of it. It's great. I can't wait to make the next one.
That's exactly how I feel right
now. Because the next one's gonna be really good.
Yeah. And
this one's fine. I'm happy with it.
Yeah. And I promise you, also, you've probably just seen it so many times that you can't be objective about it.
Not at all.
Because I've heard my own
the problems.
Yeah, because I've heard my own album so many times at this point, and exactly what you just said. Talking to people, I'll just hear parts of the album where I'm just going, there's nothing wrong with it. I just know I could have done it better.
Right, yeah. See, it shows you how good I am at promotion. I'm sitting here trying to help you sell your album, and I'm getting you to the point where you're telling people the next one's going to be better, guys. So
I'm
so bad at this.
You should just get this one to hold you over.
I'm so bad at this.
Just hold you over for a little while longer.
Nat, how do people find you on the internet? How do they find tour dates?
So literally, I'm the only Nat Baimel in existence.
Nice.
So if you
what's that like?
Pretty comforting, actually. It's pretty nice. I don't have to worry about having weird handles on everything.
Yeah, you don't have to
Nat Baimel comedian 27.
You don't have to worry about having a kid that ruins Star Wars that everybody thinks that you are.
Yeah. Oh God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah. So just Facebook, Nat Baimel, at Nat Baimel on Twitter and Instagram, natbaimel.com. You will find all my stuff. I'll be sure to promote it very humbly and awkwardly.
Album is available on iTunes currently?
It's on iTunes, it's on Amazon, it's on Google, it's on Pandora, it's on Spotify. It'll be
nice.
on XM
they can
Radio.
listen to it on Spotify right now.
Yep.
but you would prefer they buy it.
Oh, whatever you want. Honestly, if you go on Spotify, I think I get paid for that for every listen.
Question mark?
Question mark? Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, I love the idea of making money off this thing, but more than anything, I just want to get it out there. I just like the idea of people hearing my point of view.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Isn't that why you got into this to begin with?
I'm an artist, gosh darn it.
Well, on that note, please follow me on Twitter at LiquidJake. Please follow the show on all social media at ElaboratePod. It's so hard. How do I get people to follow these things? Do me a favor. If you're listening to this show, do it right now. Go to your phone, follow at ElaboratePod on like Instagram and Twitter. All the accounts are like brand new because it took forever to start them. There's like 9 people. I can't like just help me out. Help a brother out. I've been told that I need to be more social media active, and I don't know how to do this. I feel like a grandfather holding a phone going, what are these kids doing with the stories and the Instagrams? But yes, ElaboratePod on all social media. And as always, follow Dragon Wagon at It's Dragon Wagon on all social media as well. Do us a favor, rate and review the show. Once you're done listening to this show, you're going to hit a little 5-star. You're going to leave a review about the show. You're going to lie. I don't care. If you didn't like this, just lie. There's nothing that says you have to be honest on iTunes reviews. And make sure you do the exact same thing for Nat Baimel's Be Nice, because ratings and reviews go a long way on any listening platform. So make sure you rate and review his album as well. Please share it with those you love. And in closing, please do not be an influencer, be an artist, create art, not content. Thank you so much for listening. Nat, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I love you.
I love you.
Hey everybody, I am sitting here with the delightfully tacky yet unrefined Zen Zenith.
I'm taken aback by that.
That's literally the slogan to Hooters. I don't know why. It just popped in my head.
Well, that's when I think me, I think Hooters. Thanks, Jake. So yeah, I'm here on your podcast to talk about my podcast.
You
right?
are. You have a
or
really...
am I just here for you to compare me to Hooters?
You have a really incredible podcast. All jokes aside, it is one of my absolute favorite experiences because I love discovering music through live performance, especially intimate live performances, and that is exactly what your show is.
Right. Once a month, we meet at your apartment, and we have a couple artists here who play in front of a live audience, and then I talk to them. We do a Q&A with the audience, and the whole thing gets recorded for your listening pleasure.
3 of my new favorite artists are from the House Show.
Yeah, me too, man. It's such a pleasure to get to meet such talented folks, and you can check it all out for yourself at thehouseshowshow.com or on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever else you might listen to podcasts.
So do just that.
It's Dragon Wagon.